දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, a proud nation for all. Addressing the nation, President Gotabaya assures a governance that upholds the rights of all, irrespective of race or religion, in a sovereign unitary state. Divided budget opinions. Parliamentarian Iran Vikramaratne says government's budget figures unrealistic.
Now that's just not feasible because the first thing is the government won't even reach its 2020 budget estimate.
But State Minister Cabral says otherwise.
This is if we were to ensure that these projects are moving with some speed, in fact the Prime Minister mentioned that, then you would find that the growth will happen automatically.
Seal of approval. Chief epidemiologist announces approval and commencement of rapid antigen testing in Colombo municipality.
The Director General of Health Services has approved to use the rapid antigen test for identification of COVID-19 patients.
Essential needs. Port of Colombo gazetted an essential service. All this and much more coming up on this Wednesday, the 18th of November 2020.
Nava sunlight sakura. Then Dikukal pavathina sakura mal suwandin.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanila Fernando in your top stories for tonight. Addressing the nation a short while ago on the eve of the completion of his first year in office, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa stated that a country that serves all its citizens, irrespective of race or religion, will be ensured during his tenure. The president also pledged to maintain the country's position as a neutral and friendly nation that will not be party to geopolitical power games.
මීට වසරකට පෙර මේ රටේ 69 ලක්ෂයකට අධික ඡන්දදායකයන් ඔබේ නව ජනාධිපතිවරයා ලෙස මාව පත් කරගත්තා. ජනතාව මගෙන් කළ ප්‍රධානතම ඉල්ලීම රට බේරා දෙන්න යන්නයි. ජනතාව ඉල්ලා සිටි ආකාරයට රට සුරක්ෂිත කරන්නට අවශ්‍ය පියවර අප මේ කෙටි කාලය තුල ගෙන තිබෙනවා. තවදුරටත් ජනතාව මේ ගැන බිය සැක තබා ගත යුතු නැහැ. මගේ දූර කාලය තුල ජාති ආගම් ભેදයකින් තොරව සියලු පුරවැසියන්ට සාධාරණත්වය ඉටුවන ඔවුන්ගේ අයිතිවාසිකම් සුරැකෙන පාලන තන්ත්‍රයක් රට තුල ඇති කරන අතර මේ රටේ උත්තරීතර ව්‍යවස්ථාවට අනුව රටේ ඒකීය භාවය ආරක්ෂා කරන බවට බුද්ධ ශාසනය සුරක්ෂිත කොට පෝෂණය කරන බවට එදා රුවන්වැලි සෑ පුදබිමේදී ප්‍රතිඥාවට අනුව මම සෑම විටම ක්‍රියා කොට තිබෙනවා. රණවිරුවන් පාවා දෙන ජාතික සම්පත් විකුණන කෙටිකාලීන වාසි වෙනුවෙන් ඕනෑම ගිවිසුමක් පිළිගන්නට සූදානම් විදේශ බලවේගවලට රටේ අභ්‍යන්තර කටයුතු වලට ඇඟිලි ගැසීමට ඉඩ දෙන යුගය දැන් අවසන් වී තිබෙනවා. සියලු රටවල් සමග මිත්‍රශීලී සම්බන්ධතා පවත්වන්නට සූදානම්. කිසිදු රටකට ගැති නොවන බලවත් ජාතීන් අතර ගැටුම් වලට පාර්ශවකරුවෙක් නොවන අභිමානවත් ස්වෛරී රටක් ලෙස අපි යලිත් අපේ ස්ථාවරය ලොවට පෙන්වා තිබෙනවා. කලාපීය බලවතුන්ගෙන් මෙන්ම ගෝලීය බලවතුන්ගෙන් අද අපට නිසි ගෞරවය ලැබෙන්නේ නිසයි.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගිමත් දිවයකට ලංකාවේ පළමු වරට හඳුන්වා දෙන මැලිබන් වෙජි ක්‍රැකර්
Crunchy veggie.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has declared the operations of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority as an essential service. The extraordinary Gazette notification pertaining to this declaration was published by the Secretary to President P.B. Jayasundara yesterday. The order by the President was made in terms of Section 2 of the Essential Public Services Act number 61 of 1979. It includes all services, work of labour of any description necessary or required to be done by or in connection with the SLPA established by Section 3 of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority Act number 51 of 1979. Speaking to Indivari Amuwatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park yesterday, State Minister Ajit Nivard Cabral stated that the government's 5% growth target is not one that is unachievable when taking the country's underutilized capacity into consideration. The State Minister revealed that with almost 300 projects with a combined value of 5 trillion rupees currently in varied stages of limbo, laying the groundwork to help them get off the ground and running rapidly will ensure automatic growth. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary S.R. Artigala stated that the biggest reform in the budget is the announcement of a stable tax environment for the next 5 years that will allow foreign investors the peace of mind to confidently make long-term investments in the country.
Because we're talking about taxes, I think a big reform is to say that next 5 years we will keep these taxes unchanged. That's a big reform because any investor could plan their investment accordingly. That's a huge reform. And in the Inland Revenue, to add what Sujeeva mentioned, the large taxpayer unit, right? That's another big reform. I think he will know exactly what's happening there. So those things are here in this budget.
Large taxpayer unit contributes 80% of collections.
Yeah, because certain people think that reforms can't happen without some external
IMF coming or something else coming.
I didn't mention external. But these are all homegrown reforms.
As Sujeeva mentioned, you see, we have, since it comes under, to some extent, under my purview, the monitoring of these projects, there are at the moment, Sujeeva, about 289 projects which are more than ₹1 billion each, and with a total value of around 5 trillion rupees. That's $29 billion. Now, what it says is, if we were to ensure that these projects are moving with some speed, and in fact the Prime Minister mentioned that, then you would find that the growth will happen automatically.
Absolutely.
But most of those projects, we have been doing a review, we find those projects are being hemmed in because there is some issue or the other. Maybe there is some place where there has been land acquisition not being done, or some people are protesting, or there has been some money that has to come which has not come in at the right time. So little problems like that, which can be sorted out very quickly. So now we are setting up several units to review all these things, and then once that is regularized, you will find that these projects will start moving fast. There are about 175 of those projects which are funded from external sources. So there is enough capacity for us to grow. It's just that some of those capacity has not been utilized. So as Mr. Artikala very rightly mentioned, if we were to make sure that those are utilized and then this growth occurs, you would find that Sri Lanka will be on the growth path once again. And with that will come the other components coming from the private sector. You would find that we can very easily achieve this 5% or 6% growth next year, particularly because we have had a low base as well. So we got to be optimistic. We got to work hard. It won't just happen. But if we were to do it properly, we'll definitely have that potential to grow, and that's what we are aiming at.
Samagi Janabalawege parliamentarian Iran Vikramaratne says that the revenue targets presented in the budget yesterday are unfeasible and unrealistic, and predicts a shortfall of 300 billion rupees.
Some of the objectives of the budget were good, but the problem with most budgets is it's not to do with its objectives often. It's often to do with what are the policies that the government is going to follow, and what is the way in which that they are going to deliver on their objectives. And one of the problems I had at a philosophical level with the budget was that in society you have segments of people, some who are prosperous and there are others who are vulnerable. And in addition to that, we have learned with COVID that if you look at a life cycle of a person, even though a person may be middle class and looking prosperous, even within that life cycle, somebody could be vulnerable. So the task of a finance minister is actually to balance a budget in a way that all of society is taken care of. And I must say that that's one thing that didn't happen yesterday. Because if you looked at the proposals of the budget, it certainly didn't favor those who were less vulnerable. One of the big problems in the budget was actually the statistics and the data provided. The government said in its budget that it had a revenue of rupees billion 1,588 in 2020, and it then had a revenue expectation of over rupees 2,029. That is a 27% increase in revenue. Now that's just not feasible, because the first thing is the government won't even reach its 2020 budget estimate. The budget will be short by at least 300 billion, in my view, of the estimate. So based on government numbers, revenue was supposed to increase in 2021 to about 27%, but when you actually take the shortfall, then the increase in revenue has to be over 40%. So this is not feasible. So the numbers that the government is projecting are unrealistic.
The Parliament debate of Budget 2021 began today. The opposition expressed amazement over the positive economic growth rate figures forecast by the government, despite a negative economic growth forecast by many international agencies. The government, meanwhile, accused the opposition of being the true architects of the most misleading budgets presented in Parliament.
බොහෝ දෙනෙක් හිතුවා කතානායකතුමනි 2020 ආර්ථිකය ඍණ වෙයි කියලා. ලෝක බැංකුව කියලා තිබුණා පුරෝකථනය කරලා තිබුණා ඍණ 6.7ක් වෙයි. ආසියානු සංවර්ධන බැංකුව කියලා තිබා ඍණ 5ක් වෙයි. ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල අරමුදල කියලා තිබා ඍණ 4.7ක් වෙයි. කතානායකතුමනි මහා බැංකුව පවා කියලා තිබුණා ඍණ 1.7ක් වෙයි කියලා මූර්ත ආර්ථික වර්ධනය. හැබැයි කතානායකතුමනි මේ සියල්ලම බොරු කරගෙන ගිය සතියේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ නාමික ආර්ථික වර්ධනය ධන 6.7යි කියලා මෙන්න මේ අයවැය කතාවේ තියෙනවා. පුදුමයි. ඒ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයට අනුව ඇත්තයි. මේ අයවැය කනගාටු වෙනවා අපි කිසිම ආර්ථික උත්තේජක වැඩපිළිවෙලක් ඉදිරිපත් කළා නැහැ. බොහෝ දෙනා හිතුවේ ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිතුමා විප්ලවීය ආර්ථික දැක්මක් ඉදිරිපත් කරයි කියලා වියතුන් එක්ක එකතු වෙලා. අපිට කනගාටු වෙනවා 2020 මුළු ණය බර රුපියල් බිලියන 14261යි. ඩොලර් වලින් නම් ඩොලර් මිලියන 6700ක් තියෙනවා අපිට ගෙවන්න. අපිට තියෙන්නේ සංචිත ඇමරිකන් ඩොලර් බිලියන 5.8යි. මේක තමයි අපිට තියෙන මේ හෙට අනිද්දාම විසඳන්න තියෙන මූලික ප්‍රශ්නය. මේ රට ලොකු අගාධයකට වැටෙන්න ඉඩ තියෙනවා.
ලංකා ඉතිහාසයේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව වැඩියෙන්ම නොමග යවපු අයවැය ලේඛන ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම පිළිබඳ වාර්තාවේ සත්‍ය හා නිත්‍ය උරුමකරුවන් වෙන්නේ ඔබතුමන්ලා. විදේශ ණය ගෙවා ගන්න විදියක් නැහැ කියලා හම්බන්තොට වරාය ඇමරිකානු ඩොලර් බිලියන 1.4ට වික්කේ ණය ගෙවන්න බෑ කිව්වා. හැබැයි ගත්ත 1.4න් සතයක්වත් විදේශ ණය ගෙවන්න පාවිච්චි කළේ නැහැ. මේ අසත්‍ය තමයි විකුණුවේ.
මේ 2021 අයවැය කොවිඩ් නිසා ඇතිවෙච්ච ආර්ථික අර්බුදයටවත් ඒ වගේම රාජ්‍ය මූල්‍ය අර්බුදයටවත් එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ විදේශ ණය අර්බුදය කියන තුනටම එකකටවත් කිසිම විසඳුමක් නැති අයවැයක් හැටියටයි අපි දකින්නේ. අන්තර්ජාතික ශ්‍රේණිගත කිරීම වලින් පහළම තත්ත්වය අපිට වැටලා තියෙනවා. 2021 මෙතනිනුත් පහළට වැටෙනවා. දැන් C ශ්‍රේණියට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන විදේශ ණය ගෙවීමේ ශ්‍රේණිගත කිරීම. D ශ්‍රේණිය කියන්නේ ඩිෆෝල්ට්. එතෙන්ට වැටුණාට පස්සේ මේ රට ඉතුරු වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
Following yesterday's budget presentation, the Colombo Stock Exchange has welcomed what it termed progressive proposals included in relation to the capital markets. It also welcomed long-term sustainable measures proposed by the Sri Lankan government to encourage companies to list on the CSE, encourage savings and investments among Sri Lankan citizens and improve the attractiveness of real estate investment trust through tax concessions. Also highlighted was the government's measures of promoting new listing on CSE with a 50% tax concession to be granted for companies listing on the CSE before 31st December 2021. Further, the government's exemption of stock market investments from capital gains tax and proposal to include investments made in shares of listed companies as deductible expenditures in the calculation of personal income tax was also welcomed. The CSE added that the government's proposed exemption of such investments from capital gains tax and dividends free from income tax would largely improve the attractiveness of REITs investment. More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. Now, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa celebrated his 75th birthday today. The Premier participated in religious observances today held at the AdaDerana temple in Narahempeta this morning.
Born on November 18, 1945 in Veerakatiya, Hambantota, Mahinda Rajapaksa was elected to Parliament in 1970 as the youngest parliamentarian to ever be elected. He also held the cabinet ministerial portfolio of Labour and Fisheries from 1994 to 2001 under the Chandrika Bandaranayake Kumaratunga government. He became the leader of the opposition in March 2002 and was sworn in as the 13th Prime Minister of Sri Lanka after the general elections held in 2004. Contesting the 2005 presidential election as the candidate of the United People's Freedom Alliance, Mahinda Rajapaksa defeated UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe and was elected as the 5th executive president of the country. As the Commander-in-Chief, Mahinda Rajapaksa launched the humanitarian operation to liberate the Mavillaru Sluice Gate and allow thousands of people access to water that was denied by the LTTE. In 2009, Mahinda Rajapaksa put an end to a 30-year conflict by defeating one of the most brutal terrorist organizations in the world, the LTTE. Following the end of the civil war, he led the country towards exponential development by constructing highways, power plants and launching many other development projects. Mahinda Rajapaksa played a pivotal role in leading his brother Gotabaya Rajapaksa to victory in 2019 presidential election. He was re-elected with a record number of preferential votes and became the country's Prime Minister for the 4th time. Celebrating his 75th birthday, the Prime Minister engaged in religious observances today.
A minor earth tremor has been reported from the Ambakote area in Pallekele in Kandy. The tremor had reportedly occurred this morning and was felt in households across the area. Earlier in September, a minor earthquake reported in the same area that geologists were studying whether it was caused by induced seismic activity linked to the nearby Victoria Dam or an underground limestone collapse. Sri Lanka's Geological Survey and Mines Bureau had at the time dispatched 2 teams to investigate the quakes. The much-awaited rapid antigen testing for COVID-19 commenced today in several areas of the Colombo municipality, following approval being granted by Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena. In the meantime, Minister of Health Pavitra Vanyarache says that the support of former Director General of Health Services Dr. Anil Jasinghe will be used in the future efforts of the government in combating COVID-19. Meanwhile, in news just in, Sri Lanka reported 3 more COVID-19 deaths a short while ago, increasing the country's death toll to 69.
Sri Lanka confirmed another 5 COVID-19 fatalities yesterday. All the victims were reported to be residents of the Colombo district. They included a 69-year-old woman from Ratmalana who succumbed to the virus while self-quarantining at her residence. The patient had reportedly suffered from underlying health conditions such as high blood pressure and diabetes. In addition, the other victim was reported to be a 71-year-old woman, a resident of Kirulapana, who also had diabetes too. Further, an 82-year-old man from Demtegoda also died at his residence. He too had underlying health issues such as high blood pressure and diabetes. The fourth decease was reported to be a 65-year-old patient from Colombo 10 who passed away while receiving treatment at the Valikando hospital. The fifth victim was another 81-year-old woman residing in Colombo 2. In the meantime, a total of 401 COVID-19 infections were confirmed from 9 districts yesterday, with 201 confirmed from the Colombo district alone. Apart from Colombo, 82 were reported from Gampaha, 32 from Kalutara, 9 from Gaul, and 7 from Kegol. What's more, 4 infections were detected from Kandy, 3 from Kurunegala, 2 from Nuwara Eliya, and a single infection from Puttaram was confirmed yesterday. Yesterday's infections also included 26 cases related to the prison system and 27 from the police. In other developments, guidelines for the use of rapid antigen test kits developed by the Ministry of Health have now been recommended for use in the state health sector and in public health management.
The Director General of Health Services has approved to use the rapid antigen test for identification of COVID-19 patients, especially among the contacts as well as people who are coming to the hospitals with COVID-19 like symptoms. So with this we will be able to identify the patients rapidly because this test will be carried out at the site of the collection of the sample, and also results will give us within 30 minutes, like a shorter period of time. So because of that we will be able to identify more cases that will help us to isolate them and also treat them at identified places.
Accordingly, rapid antigen testing commenced today in areas around the Colombo municipality. In the meantime, Minister of Health Pavitra Vaniyarachi stated in Parliament today that former Director General of Health Services Dr. Anil Jasinga will be attending all meetings on COVID-19 mitigation in the future. Dr. Jasinga currently serves as the Secretary to the Ministry of Environment. Meanwhile, the total number of active cases from COVID-19 now stands at 5,655. In addition, 12,587 COVID-19 patients have recovered and were discharged from hospitals.
A prison inmate died during an escape attempt at the Old Bogambara prison last night after prison guards opened fire on the fleeing inmates. One inmate who managed to escape the prison was arrested today in Kandy.
5 prison inmates at the Old Bogambara prison in Kandy who were placed in quarantine have reportedly escaped from their holding cell after breaking through the metal bars on its windows. The Commissioner General of Prisons revealed that prison officers had opened fire at the prisoners after they scaled a 30-foot perimeter wall during their escape attempt. One escapee who fell off the wall and sustained serious injuries died after being admitted to the Kandy General Hospital. The deceased inmate has been identified as a 30-year-old resident of Katukaliyava in Anuradhapura, who was remanded on charges of murder and drug racketeering. Further, another inmate who attempted to escape is currently receiving treatment at the Kandy hospital after sustaining injuries. What's more, prison officers were able to arrest 2 other inmates at the scene. However, one inmate managed to escape. The escapee was later arrested while hiding at the Zonal Education Office premises in Kandy. In the meantime, Kandy Magistrate M. Farikdeen inspected the Old Bogambara prison this afternoon. Elsewhere in Colombo, a group of inmates at the Badikara remand prison staged a protest on the prison roof this afternoon. Prison sources said that the inmates were demanding that their court proceedings be expedited in a speedy manner.
The Cabinet of Ministers has granted approval for the implementation of the Unitary Digital Identifier Framework and the E-National Identity Card project. This includes approval for the Unitary Digital Identification Framework finalized by the committee entrusted with the planning of the relevant programs. Further, a presidential task force will also be appointed to assist with the guidance required for the establishment of the Unitary Digital Identification Framework. The responsibility of the implementation of the project has been entrusted to the Sri Lanka Information and Communication Technology Agency and the Department of Registration of Persons. The project is stated to be finalized by 31st December 2022. We'll return after the short commercial break. Stay tuned. Welcome back in your business news. Sri Lankan stocks closed 0.01% lower today, with the all-share price index falling 0.71 points, while the S&P SL 20 index of most liquid stocks gained 0.06%. Here's a brief report on market performance today.
Today we saw a bit of a dip in the market. Post-budget we are seeing some profit taking in the overall market. Specifically, if we look at it, some of the retail favorite counters had some profit taking. We saw a bit of a shift into blue chip counters again. Buying interest was prevalent in the blue chip counters, and even in the turnover list we saw turnover increasing in the blue chip counters. Turnover levels were rather healthy today, reaching about 2.4 billion of turnover. Slightly better off compared to last week where we had a bit of a dull sentiment. If we look at the foreign side of things, we saw a bit of an outflow again today. Net foreign outflow of around 50 million rupees were recorded. However, in addition to the foreign selling, there seems to be a bit of a foreign buying also coming into the market. So we saw the foreign participation increasing to around 8% today.
With that, we wind up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. Have a good night.